the one thing I learned when I was in China, and it was also, the vice chairman of the European Chamber for 3 years there, and you mentioned exactly the mistake the Chinese made in, trying to alienate the businesses. That was also, by the way, applicable to the European business. But what I found is, how sometimes the impression of China and the information of China, when you live in a country and you see how what kind of wrong information were distributed about China and how little people know about China. And I think that's one of the big advantages China has, that they obviously know much more about the West than the West has. And I think that hasn't changed much until today, that the West doesn't actually know much about China. How can we change that, actually? What's your advice? I think it is a structural disadvantage we have, because if you don't know you're dealing with, then I think that's a clear disadvantage.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the obvious cheeky answer is get Europeans to read my book. Fortunately, the French edition is out, the Dutch edition is out, the Portuguese edition is out, the German edition is coming out. So hopefully it'll be read in Europe too. But I would say that, just as, let me pick a very sensitive example. Germany is very, very careful in its relations with Israel. Very careful. Why? History. You remember history? Now, I would say Europeans should be very, very careful dealing with China. Why? History. The Chinese remember exactly, with great precision, everything that happened in the century of humiliation, which, by the way, they have for the last 30, 40 years actually suppressed, because they didn't want to have that trouble China's relations with Europe. But if the Europeans start pushing China around, the Chinese will bring out the history and say, when we were weak, you didn't come and save our human rights. You put up a sign in the Shanghai park saying, no dogs and Chinese allowed in this park. Europeans have forgotten that. Chinese remember that. And when all this history surfaces, right? And I can tell you that what actually sparked the revival of China was something that also happened 100 years ago, right? When after Germany lost World War I, and China had sent, I don't know the exact figures, 400,000 to 500,000 Chinese to help the Allies in their effort against Germany. At the end of World War I, the Chinese said, we helped you so much. When we defeat Germany, the German concessions in Shandong must go back to China, since China fought with the Allies against Germany. Instead, the Allies gave it to Japan. And that started the great revival of China, because the Chinese said, this is so humiliating. We cannot accept this. Right? How many Germans, how many Europeans remember this? The Chinese, every Chinese knows this. So if you don't know the history of what Europe did to China from roughly 1842 to 1949, then you are at a great disadvantage in dealing with China.
So I guess we need to better educate ourselves and our children. If I look at German history books nowadays, you read maybe a lot about the Roman Empire and others, but there's a few pages on China, and I think that's not good enough anymore. Because obviously history teaches us much more, and you just gave us a very good example.